Hey guys, I'm back here with another knife review, and this would probably be one of those holy grail knives that lots of people are desiring to have. Um, every time I watch a video on YouTube or read about Chris Reeve Knives, I kind of get this gut-wrenching feeling, mostly because of value. These are not cheap knives, and whenever I watch a review, I notice that the people, obviously, they're very knowledgeable, and I do have a lot of respect for people on YouTube for sure. But what I notice is that people get really hung up on the details. And I think that is sort of an effort to justify the cost of the knife. And of course, they're sophisticated users, so they have a lot to say about it, and that's cool. I respect that. But I find that the reviews go on and on and on about really sort of minute details, like, this little backspacer here. Oh, it's made of, aircraft grade stainless steel, and this and that, right? Like just sort of an endless, list of details about the knife. And I find that there's nothing really, compelling about what makes this knife performance-wise significantly different than any other knife that you could pick up for much less money. So that's sort of like the first thing. I'm not like a Chris Reeve fanboy. I don't know if I'm a fan of any company really in particular, but if I had to choose one, it would be Spyderco for sure. So anyways, that's sort of just my intro. Let's talk about like the knife, some general things about it. So it's called the Umnumzaan, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's the Zulu language from South Africa. This means boss or head of the family. Chris Reeve is from South Africa, so I guess that's sort of a tribute to his lineage and all that stuff. So that's pretty cool. I like the name. This knife won overall best knife of the year in the Blade Show 2008. So obviously, it's a lot of people respect this knife and they really like it. So that's cool. What I find interesting though is that if anybody remembers their history, because I know people have memories that last like nanoseconds now, 2008 was basically the beginning of the worst recession that many of us have experienced in our lives. Millions of people lost their jobs, lost their life savings. It was a devastating year for a lot of people. I was fortunate enough to sort of coast through that recession without being unemployed for a long part of it, but I was still affected by it. I'm not going to get into how, but it did affect it affected everybody on the planet basically. So I find it interesting that during that year, which was the beginning of this event, the knife that won the Blade Show Knife of the Year was basically a $500 knife that most people are not going to buy, and even people who do know something about blades, most of them are not going to buy it. So it's only a knife suited to a very, very small slice of the population, not including myself. This knife is borrowed. Okay, so let's get into the materials involved and like the blade itself. So just looking at it aesthetically, I think it's a handsome knife for sure. I like the gray on gray or the silver on silver colors. I think that that's pretty cool. I don't know that much about titanium. Like, I'm really not nuts about the materials involved here. I think that they're cool, but they're not, like earth-shattering for me. But I'm open-minded, so I'm willing to just kind of like look at it in and of itself and see if I like it. So the first thing that I really like is this sort of textured pattern on the handle. I think that that's pretty sweet, actually. It's cool looking, but it's also functional. I think that it does serve in terms of its design as just like an aesthetic thing, but also it does provide traction, which is pretty frequently lacking on steel-handled knives. I've had stainless steel knives before, and I generally don't like those. I handled that the Benchmade Osborne with the aluminum handle, and I did kind of like that actually. But one thing it didn't provide was a lot of traction, that's for sure. So that's kind of interesting. Other than that, the pivot here, this is a proprietary, you need a special tool to open that. So that might be a turnoff for some people, that you cannot just easily take the knife apart by yourself, but I'm assuming that most people who buy this, they're expecting it to be perfection, so I guess you wouldn't really need to take it apart anyways, but it's nice to have the option. The pocket clip is, I believe this is made of titanium, and it looks like it is replaceable, but it is not swappable to any other orientation except for right hand tip up. So I believe that they make this knife in a left-handed edition, so it could suit suit lefties that way. I'm actually a lefty, but I pretty much do a lot of things right-handed, including opening and closing knives, so I don't have a problem with that. Something else that's kind of cool is up top here, you have this kind of piece sticking out. And when I first looked at this, I wasn't sure what it is, but after doing a bit of research, I found out that this is a glass breaker. So that's pretty sweet that, you know, it's just built in. It's really very unobtrusive. It's not like you're going to be banging into it or anything like that. It's put in a place where your fingers are not naturally going to travel, so it doesn't interfere with anything. And it's just a nice feature to have. I've seen on other knives, you squeeze the blade and then the glass breaker will come out the bottom or something along those lines. So it's kind of cool just to have it integrated there. I like that. This knife, it comes, I believe the newer models, they have a lock bar stabilizer there so that you don't overextend the frame lock. This edition that I'm holding does not have it. Okay, so let's open it up, and oh well, before we do that, it is flow through design, so it should be fairly easy to clean this knife, I would say, and keep it clean. But anyways, let's open it up and have a look at it. So you can see here's the lock, right? The Chris Reeve integral lock or the frame lock, whatever you want to call it, and it does have quite a bit of engagement there on the knife. So I believe a big concern about frame locks is just sort of the wear and tear over the life of the knife. You know, people are worried about overextending it or it losing its engagement surface there, but this one looks like it's got plenty of engagement. I can't really say that I like frame locks all that much, to be honest. I kind of prefer liner locks because I'm able to operate them easier one-handed. You know, frame lock knives, like titanium frame locks anyways, they tend to be very pricey, so I just don't find myself in the market for buying them. And also, I find them more difficult to operate one-handed. You need more force to sort of move that back and close the blade. So this knife in particular, I'm not able to do it one-handed. If I try, I feel like I'm going to cut myself. So I just don't, you know, this is not my knife. I'm just sort of, I've got it for a few days to check it out and review it. But I'm not going to risk cutting myself to try to master closing this one-handed. So I just, you know, I just do it two-handed. No big deal. So let's talk first about the speed of the knife, and I'll probably screw this up, but I'm not able to open this knife very fast. Let's put it that way. I can get it open. I can do like a nice little flick there, and it'll fly open for me. But it's definitely not the fastest knife that I have ever seen or handled. And it's not the smoothest knife I've ever handled either. People, you know, they rave about these knives and how it's so perfect in so many different ways, but I don't find this knife to be all that smooth at all. So, and something interesting though is like when you open it up here, I'll do it again really slowly and I'll shut up so you can hear it. It gives a very satisfying lock-up sound. You see the thumb studs actually turn into a stop pin, and then the frame lock here holds it all in place. So I guess it's sort of having force applied to it from two different places, and it's very stable lock-up, you know, nice and tight. So that's cool. Okay, let's talk about the blade shape, because I do think that that is sort of a highlight of the knife as far as I'm concerned. It's got sort of that perfect belly on it. I believe this is hollow ground, if I'm not mistaken. You know, it's S35VN. It's a steel that I don't really know that much about, but I've had a few S30Vs before, and it's good steel. It should hold its edge quite a long time. The belly is just absolutely perfect on this knife. Like, really, if I was to say one really good thing about this knife, I do think the blade shape is pretty outstanding. Just no funny stuff going on the bottom, so it's going to cut and perform very well, I think. And then on top, you've got a little bit of jimping here. It's not very aggressive jimping, but when you sort of hold it in the hand and you can really lock into it, you know, a combination of the handle shape, it just fits the hand nicely. The traction from these cutouts on the titanium handle, they provide a bit of grip as well. And then the jimping, it locks in very nicely actually. So, you know, it's got that going for it. Also, it's got like this little hump here. It's got rather two little sort of grooves, I guess I could call them. I'm not sure what the right word is, but you can actually choke up and sort of put your finger on the first one and do some detailed work with that. So that's pretty sweet. I don't know what this one is for. And up here towards the tip, it's not sharp. It's sharp enough that if you run your finger on it, you will hear, you know, it's sort of, it's aggressive. There's no kidding about that. but it's not sharp enough to like cut paper or something like that, you know. And while I got the paper out, let's just do a quick cut test here. This is not the sharpest knife I've ever handled, but again, it's not my knife. Sharp enough to cut paper, that's for sure. It's not shaving sharp though. So yeah, that's the knife. Overall impressions, it's nice. I can't say that it's not. There's some nice details there for sure, but there's a lot of knives out there that I prefer more than this. Let me just roll in some options here so you can see what, in terms of size comparison, how similar they are. I've got the Rat 1 by Ontario here, and these knives are basically the same size. You know, the blade shape, you know, the belly and everything on the blade look very similar. Obviously, the top of the knife here is the spine or whatever is like a different shape. The jimping is actually remarkably similar on both knives. Well, it's not that similar, I guess, but it's sort of non-aggressive jimping in both cases. And just overall, like the handle size is similar, the blade size is similar as well. So that's the Rat 1. I'll show you the Spyderco Sage 2. And this is not really similar in terms of size, definitely, but it is similar in terms of the materials involved. Because again, you've got a titanium frame lock here, S30V, so not exactly the same, but you know, there's something going on. People often compare this with the small Sebenza, and it's pretty much the same materials, and it's about half the cost, so that's interesting. What I do like about this knife, though, I find it much faster and easier to open, and I can close it one-handed, no problem. So that's the Sage 2. I'll roll in the Endura here. I don't really know why, but you know, it's sort of in the ballpark in terms of sizing. It's, you know, somewhat similar. And maybe I'll show the Paramilitary 2 as well. So there we go. They're all sort of, you know, that larger EDC knife, you know, semi-tactical, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, those are some options there. So I'm going to end this video just by talking to the value of this knife, and I'm going to make this real. We were talking about the recession earlier and how this knife is kind of spaced out in terms of like its affordability. But what I want to show you now is I'm going to count some money out here and show you exactly how much this knife costs in paper form. I got into the habit of having cash on hand because, you know, in terms of prepping or whatever, it's good to have some cash around. So there's $100, $200, $300. 400, $500 is what this knife would cost. That's a lot of cash, man. Like, look at this. Are you prepared to work for, you know, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, whatever, and take away from everything else that you're doing in your knife in order to get this knife? The answer for me, obviously, is no. You know, that's a lot of money, and for that money I can do a lot of fun things. I could go take a trip and I can buy a knife, you know. I can pay for my car for the month. I don't have a car, but that's, you know, with insurance and, you know, maybe a lease agreement or whatever, like that's what a car is going to cost people for a month. Some people pay $500 a month in rent, you know, like that's a lot of money. And so anyways, I'm going to end this video by showing you the competitive options I was just discussing. And what we're going to do is, for every knife here, we're going to say, this is what we could buy instead of the Umnumzaan. And I'm going to take away a little bit of money for each one. Okay, so this is the Rat 1. This costs about $40 where I am. So let's take that $40 out. Here's the Sage 2. Where I am, that costs about $200. So let's take the 200 out. Here we go. 200 gone. So now we've got a Rat 1 and a Sage 2, and we still have all this money left over. What else could we buy with that? Oh, well, what about the Endura? Okay, the Endura, you know, you could argue about how much that costs, but where I am, that's about 60 to $70, so let's take out 60 here. And then what about the Paramilitary 2? That's a really nice knife. I think a lot of people would agree with that. Where I am, this might cost 110, 120. Let's take out 120 just for argument's sake. 6. Okay, so now we have a Paramilitary 2, a Rat 1, an Endura for FFG, and a Sage 2. All of that we've bought, and we still have $80 left over to go get a nice meal with our girlfriend or the wife or whatever. So that's a lot of blades that you can buy or you could have the Umnumzaan. And, I think it's pretty obvious what I would choose. The rest of the choice, I leave up to you. Thanks for watching.